This house in Everett, Washington is listed at $375,000, and I'm going to be talking about what it would look like to buy this place with $30,000 in cash so that you can hopefully reference some concrete and reliable information as you're thinking through a similar scenario. I'll walk you through two different quotes to illustrate how you can use that $30,000 differently with different strategies depending on your financial situation. And then I'll also show you what your monthly payment might look like if you're in a similar situation, including a breakdown of each of the components of your monthly payment, like mortgage insurance, principal and interest, taxes, homeowners insurance. My name is Landon Buto, and I'm a mortgage advisor with Cleveland Street Mortgage based in Bothell, Washington. And this channel exists to help you in the early stages of thinking about buying a house. All right, I'm going to start by walking through the assumptions that I'm using to create this quote. The purchase price for the house is $375,000. The taxes, and you can pull those up. I'm going to show you. You can pull those up generally through Zillow. You can scroll down to the bottom of the listing to where the taxes are listed on the listing, and then they show you an estimate of taxes here. But if you want to be extra sure of what those numbers might look like, because sometimes those are outdated or just are based on different information that might not be relevant, you can click over to the county website, and for the most part there's pretty accurate information here that will give you a better idea. And so for this place, if you scroll down to the distribution of current taxes, here you can see where each of these are coming from, but you can see the total here is $2,810, which is really low because obviously this house is very inexpensive for the area. So that is the number we're using for taxes, is $2,810 annually. Here's your homeowner's insurance. This is the number that I'm using, is $1,800 annually, or $150 a month, and that's just a pretty good average, pretty good estimate we have for our area for this kind of rough price point. When you get your homeowner's insurance and you are the one to do that, your mortgage lender can help in that, but you're the one at the end of the day choosing your homeowner's insurance. And when you choose your homeowner's insurance, you can choose different packages, so the pricing could be different there depending on what your coverage is. However, that's the number that I'm going to assume for now. And so these two right here, taxes and homeowner's insurance, can technically be paid outside of your monthly payment, but for qualifying purposes, they have to be included. And when I say paid outside of your monthly payment, I mean you can be the one to pay them as opposed to paying them to the lender, who then pays them on your behalf. Credit, I'm assuming, is 700, and I'm going to pair that with my other assumption here, which is that you are a first-time home buyer. And so the reason I pair those together is because your credit is definitely going to be influential on what your monthly payment is, on what pricing you can get. However, recently that impact has been mitigated a little bit for first-time home buyers specifically. So your credit primarily is going to impact your mortgage insurance as a first-time home buyer. And the reason that is because mortgage insurance is an insurance that you have to get when you put less than 20% down on a house in order to protect the lender from default. And so the more reliable of a borrower you look, the better your pricing is going to be, the lower the cost to cover your risk of defaulting. And so if you look like a really reliable borrower coming in, you have a really high credit score, then your mortgage insurance is going to be a little bit lower. However, it doesn't have quite as much of an impact, or at least not as directly correlated of an impact as it used to on other areas of your pricing, like interest rate. So that is if you're a first-time home buyer. And there's a lot of great programs for first-time home buyers in order to keep them from being too negatively impacted by a short history or a poor history in terms of credit, to be able to still get good pricing available. So those are the assumptions I'm making there. Credit of 700, and that you are a first-time home buyer, which, aside from the impact that it has aside from the fact that it mitigates the impact of your credit, Being a first-time home buyer also gets you access to certain programs, which are what I'm using to generate these quotes here that you'll see in a second. So the pricing here is based on our pricing at our company, Cleveland Street Mortgage, but it's also based on the assumption that you're a first-time home buyer, and there are certain programs that come with that are only available to first-time home buyers that have better pricing. And then the last assumption, or the last thing I wanted to illustrate here before we move on to the quote itself, is your debt to income ratio. As I talk a little bit about qualifying for this loan, I'm going to talk about what your income needs to be in order to qualify. And the way that's figured out is essentially, as a general rule for these conventional programs that I'm looking at, your debt to income ratio needs to be less than 50%. And so your debt to income ratio is just like it sounds. It's your total monthly debts divided by your gross monthly income. And that needs to be less than 50% for the most part as a general rule. There's an exception to that with FHA, where they divide what's called your front end and your back end ratio. And in that case, a lot of times with FHA, sometimes your back end ratio can be closer to, I think your back end needs to be 58% and your front end needs to then be 48% with FHA. And what that means is back end ratio separates out your other monthly debts from your housing payment. Front end is just your housing payment. Back end includes any other debts you have, like student loans, credit card debts, car loans, things like that. And so that gives you a little bit more wiggle room sometimes, but generally, in order to qualify, your total monthly debts, including your new housing payment, needs to be divided by your gross monthly income, and that your income before taxes needs to be less than 50%. Last note on that before we move on is the way this number is determined, your gross monthly income, is in the eyes of the lender, and lenders have pretty rigid rules about how they figure out what they deem as usable income. It's pretty straightforward for the most part for salaried positions. It's pretty much whatever the salary is for the most part, but with different types of pay structures, whether you're self-employed and it just varies over the years, or you are commission, or there's heavy bonus, or you're variable hours. There are pretty rigid rules as far as figuring out what your gross monthly income is, and the best way to really figure out what would be usable, it's hard to know how those rules work just kind of on your own or basic research. So the best way to figure that out is just to talk to a mortgage professional, a loan officer, if you're in that kind of situation. All right, so here is the quote we're going to look at, or the two quotes we're going to look at. And what I've done here is I've created a quote. Both, as we talked about at the start, both you can see at the bottom here are using about $30,000 in total cash to close. Okay, so both are using about $30,000 all in. Okay, one is 28.8 and the other is 30.2. Both are right around that $30,000 mark. However, one of them is, as you can see here, this is the loan to value. Right here, one of them is a 5% down scenario, the other is a 3% down scenario. So I'm going to compare those two quotes and show you what I did differently with each. There's a little bit more to it than just one is 5% and one is 3%. Big things that are noticeable are the total monthly payment is on the 5% down scenario. It's a poor label for you. On the 5% down scenario, the total monthly payment is $2,808. And on the 3% down scenario, the total monthly payment is $2,645. So intuitively, that should raise some questions. Why is the monthly payment higher when you're putting more down and you have a smaller loan amount? And then similarly, you can see in the cash to close, it's a little bit higher with the 3% down. So we're going to walk through, there are some things that are the same between them, even though the monthly payment's different and the cash is different. Specifically, the homeowner's insurance, right here you can see in this section labeled insurances, This is the breakdown of that payment. Every month you're paying $150 a month, regardless of the down payment, because that's dependent on the house. The homeowner's insurance is dependent on the house, not on how you structure the loan. The taxes as well are the same between the two scenarios, because again, that's dependent on the house, not on how you structure the loan. And then lastly, yes, there's a slight difference here, but the cash to close is about $30,000 in each. So you could come in with $30,000 in each and end up with this scenario, but you can structure it a little bit differently. And so I'm going to walk through what's different between the two. Obviously, the down payment amount is different. But there's a specific reason for making that down payment different between the two. One is 5% down, one is 3% down. What I did here is basically a strategy to help you, someone who has $30,000 and could do 5% down in terms of the cash, but they can't qualify for the monthly payment. There's a way to make the monthly payment lower with that cash if that's a priority for you. And that's not the only reason you would do this, but that's in this kind of first-time home buyer situation, in this scenario I'm describing, that's typically one of the primary good reasons to do that. And so what we did here is, so real quick, what's different is you can see the principal and interest section here is obviously going to be different because you have a different loan amount that you have to pay back each month. So that's going to be different. However, another big impact on that principal and interest component is obviously the rate. The rate is different between the two. In the 5% down scenario, it's 6.875%, the 7.136 APR. And in the 3% down, it's 1% lower. The rate is 1% lower, 5.875%. 6.426 APR. And the reason for that is this other section that I'm going to point out that is different, which is down here in points and credit. In points and credit, in the 5% down scenario, you can see there's effectively zero, $78 of credit. Whereas over here in the 3% down scenario, we used $8,832 in points and credit. And so what points are is this difference in strategy that I was talking about, is they are a way to pay a fee up front in order to get a lower interest rate. So you can see you could either get a credit from the lender to take a higher interest rate, or you can pay points to get a lower interest rate. And so even though this money here is not going into the house, it's still being put to use for you in order to lower the monthly payment. Because if we took the same $8,832 and put it towards the principal and got closer to 5% down and just put that towards the principal of the house, it doesn't have as much of an impact in reducing the total monthly payment up here as it does in this case. And that impact can vary depending on the market. But at this time when I made this quote, you can see that $8,832 reduced the interest rate enough to make a pretty big dent between your two monthly payment options. But as far as qualifying, it can be a really helpful tool, because you can see here the income that it would take to qualify for this on the 5% down scenario for this monthly payment. The income that it would take to qualify is a monthly income of $5,616 or annual of $67,392. If you remember the DTI rule, that has to be about 50% or less than 50%. Whereas over on the when you pay points to buy down the rate, you get a lower monthly payment here. In this scenario, on the 3% down scenario where we did pay points, the monthly income that it takes to qualify is $5,290, or annually that is $63,480. And so maybe you're just right on the edge where you couldn't qualify for this monthly payment. You don't quite have that income, or specifically you don't have that income. You don't have that amount of qualifying income. Maybe you have some other income that you can count on as far as budgeting, but the lenders won't recognize that, won't be able to use that in determining your qualifying ability. So you pay points to get to bump you down into this territory here. All right, if you are wanting to learn more about the home buying process and just get that process started, or just start asking questions, my name is Landon Buteau, and our team is licensed in Washington and Idaho, and we love to answer questions over the phone or email for anyone that's just has questions about that process. Or, of course, if you want to see what it'd be like to work with us, we would love to work with you. There is a link in the description here where you can watch a video of what our process is like. If that seems like it might be a good fit for you, please feel free to reach out on that page. There should be a button you can click to schedule a call with us, or to go ahead and just call away, and we will love to take your call and get the process started for you.